What's going on, everyone? You're back with your boy Jono for another quick math lesson. Today we're going to look at multiplying and dividing with significant figures, and specifically when we're looking at questions in index notation. These look really difficult. There's a lot going on. We've got decimals, we've got powers, but it's not too difficult. If you have your calculator and you can take the time to use it effectively, I guarantee you're going to get these questions right every single time. So the big throwback skill that we need to remember is how to multiply and divide indices. So if I've got something like this with b to the power of 2 and b to the power of 7 and I'm multiplying these two numbers, all I need is b to the power of 9 as my answer. So the thing you've got to remember is you just add the powers when we're multiplying. And when I'm dividing, it's the exact opposite. I'm just subtracting the powers. So p to the power of 9 divided by p to the power of 5 is equal to p to the power of 4. That's all you've got to do. When it's multiplication, add the little numbers. When it's division, subtract the little numbers. And just make sure you know that negatives do not change this. So x to the power of negative 3 multiplied by x to the power of negative 4, all I've got to do is minus 3 plus minus 4, which is equal to negative 7. So x to the negative 7 is my answer. Just be careful when we are dividing. Because we are minusing a negative, it turns into a plus. So this one here, y to the negative 8 divided by y to the negative 3, you might think, oh, y to the negative 11, but this would be negative 8 minus negative 3, and two negatives make a positive, so this becomes y to the negative 5. So our questions are going to look like this. Pretty big, heavy questions, but they're not too difficult. The first thing we've got to do is multiply the first two numbers just using your calculator and write that answer down. Then all you've got to do is you add our indices together. We know we're going to have times 10, and you just add the powers together if it's a multiplication question like this. My final hint is please just check with the calculator. If you just type this into your calculator straight away, it'll spit out a number that you could change straight away into a significant figure with the correct index notation, but you'll just have to make sure you get the zeros correct. The way we're doing it's probably a little bit more mathematically rigorous, and I would recommend doing it, but please use your calculator to check, because it'll stop you making a mistake that you might not need to make. So the first thing we've got to do is multiply these two numbers. This just becomes 6.8694, and that's all we've got to do for that step. Then we know we've got times 10, and all we need to do is add the two powers. I've got 5 and 3, so this becomes 10 to the power of 8. With these questions, it'll probably tell you how many significant figures to round that first bit to, but if it doesn't, just do what is the highest one in the question. These are all to 3 significant figures, so we've got to make sure our answer is also to 3 significant figures. This just means that the second 6 becomes rounded by the 9, so my answer is 6.87 times 10 to the power of 8, and you're done. For this next one, we just multiply the first two numbers together like we just did. This one becomes 44.46. Then I need to put times 10, and I need to add those powers together. 4 and 6 make 10, so I've got 10 to the power of 10. But we know the front bit of my answer needs to be between 1 and 10. That's our standard form. So that means I've got to move that decimal place in between the first two numbers. Because I'm moving it like this, I need to change it from to the power of 10 to the power of 11. Again, you can check this in your calculator to make sure that they're the same numbers. In the question, the highest significant figures for both of those two is just 2. So I'm just going to chop my answer off at 4.4 times 10 to the power of 11. Done. So nothing changes when we've got negative numbers. All we've got to do is add them together to get a further negative number, and we're on the money. So we're going to multiply these two together to start off, and that gives us 20.815 times 10 to the power of negative 5. Again, I've got to move this decimal point in between the 2 and the 0 to be in that standard form. When I do this, I've got to make sure that my power becomes bigger. So we're changing it from negative 5 to negative 4. Again, in the question, the highest significant figures is 4 significant figure. I've got 5 in my answer, so I'm just going to have to lop it off. That 5 changes the 1 to a 2. So I've got 2.082 times 10 to the power of negative 4. So just really make sure that we are moving the power in the correct way. So when we've moved that decimal point in between the 2 and the 0, it's really easy to make that negative 6 instead of negative 4. Again, this is where I would highly recommend typing in the whole question into calculator first like this, getting that number, seeing, oh yep, that's how many zeros there are, and then typing my answer into the calculator as well, just to make sure I've got the same number of zeros at the start of my answer. If you do this, you will see that negative 6 is definitely not correct because there would be way more zeros. like in this one. So it's just a really good way to check yourself as you go along. So nothing really changes for these division questions. I just type those first numbers in and I get 0.73. Then I've got times 10 to the power of something. 4 minus 6 is negative 2. So then that is my answer to start. I've got to make sure that my first number is between 1 and 10. So I've actually got to move the decimal point in the opposite direction this time. Because I'm moving it backwards, I've got to take that negative 2 and make it negative 3. This is a lower number, so different to the one that we did in the last example. That just means I've got my answer. 7.3 times 10 to the negative 3 is going to be correct. Again, I would highly recommend checking this in your calculator before you finish because you just know that you're going to get it right. Gives you that confidence. Thanks so much for watching this lesson, guys, and I'll see you later.